You're listening to The Justin Herman Show, where every episode he has conversations with interesting people. Here is your host, Justin Herman.
Well, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm so unbelievably excited for who we have on today. We've had on some really great guests. We've been very fortunate. We're always thankful we get to talk to really interesting, really fun people. But today we're talking to someone who my wife and I, as everyone knows my wife out there, we have become complete huge fans of. Because we've seen him on the news everywhere over the course of a big chunk of time. Say hello to everyone out there listening in on the podcast. Julio, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin.
Well, so I want to get started off here. My wife and I are big fans of yours. During the protests, every time we're sitting down to watch TV, we see this new face, Fox News, and it's wait, who is this guy? Who is this guy? And we just keep seeing him. And he looks like he is in the middle of it, reporting like on the ground what is happening. And it was unlike anything we've seen. And it's like you got so much opportunity, so much airtime to share what was actually happening in these places. So big fans, my wife and I. Let me ask you this. How did you find yourself in this career field doing what you're doing?
Oh, man. It all started back after I graduated high school. So I knew I was in the process of joining the Marine Corps Reserves. And so I knew I wanted to do that. And this was at a time when I still my parents still wanted me to go to college. And I just said, okay, fine, whatever. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I actually went to a community college for my first year. Just getting, regular stuff out of the way while I try to figure out what I wanted my major to be. And so during that time, I got involved with Turning Point USA back in 2014. This was before Turning Point really got onto the main stage during the 2016 election. Yeah. And so I started out with them, but I didn't do anything writing with them. I just worked in their warehouse because I was interested in politics. I was always interested in politics and always interested in the news ever since so I grew up in the Chicagoland area, and so I would always watch the local news there, and Chicago, even shootings were always at the top of that. So I was always interested in news and politics, and so I kind of saw this as a way to kind of see if this is something I want to get involved in. And so later on, I left for around a year for all my Marine Corps training, from boot camp to my job training. And then I came back because I'm a reservist. And so I checked into my reserve unit, and then I went back to the community college, and I continued on with Turning Point there. And then in 2015, 2016, they wanted to start this blog, and they asked me to do some writing about it, or writing for it. And so I said, sure, that's something I can do, I guess. And then during the 2016 election, I got really my first taste of protest coverage when I was covering the protests at the RNC in Cleveland and the DNC in Philadelphia. And so that's where I really was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And I saw how using my Twitter account in tandem with writing can be a good, a force multiplier on getting this information out, because obviously protests and riots, it's very, very difficult to know what's really happening unless you're there, and people are interested in stuff like that. And so I saw this is what I'm good at, and this is what I want to do. And so I decided to make a full-time commitment to it after I started going to a regular college in Indiana Wesleyan University, great school.
I know Indiana Wesleyan University very well. I was there when I was younger.
Yeah. No, so it's a great school, great campus. And so, but I was majoring in business administration. Wasn't too jazzed about it. I wanted to, but I also didn't want to get a degree. I didn't want to spend money on a degree for just journalism either, because I wanted at least a fallback. So that's why I did business administration. But I had to take like accounting, and I hate math. just in
Oh
general.
gosh, yeah. It's the worst.
I mean, accounting, the math's not hard. It's just I'm just not interested at all. I had to take 1 year of it, and I absolutely hated it. And so, but I went to Indiana Wesleyan in 2016, and then Trump won, and then 2017 began, and I could really just seeing the reaction to it, because I remember I was scrolling through Twitter, and when it became clear that Trump was winning, I saw a video of students protesting at like UCLA or UC Berkeley, starting to protest already, and Indiana Wesleyan, so obviously there wasn't actually any protests against Trump. In fact, there was actual students who were like partying because Trump Trump won.
It's great. It was the best news they've gotten in a long time.
Marion, Indiana, exactly. So I kind of saw just seeing the crazy election season that was, and then seeing the reaction to it. I just knew, I'm like, okay, if there was a time to drop out of school and kind of just hit the ground running 2 years earlier without going into a lot of student debt, this would be the time. So I remember I came back one weekend right before the spring semester ended, and I told my parents, I said, hey, I'm dropping out of school. And I wasn't asking permission to drop out of school. I was telling them, like, hey, I'm not going back to college. And I'm doing that because I have an opportunity for an internship out in DC, and I'm very confident I can turn that internship into a full-time job. And with journalism, you don't need a college degree necessarily. It's more about the experience. I already had like a year and a half worth of experience through the Turning Point blog. And so I said, okay, I'm confident about this. However, if this doesn't work out, I have a few fallback plans, which include going back to college. But this is something that I want to do. And surprisingly, my parents were very supportive of it. Wow. And it was because they could tell I was very passionate about it. They could see I had a plan for it, and I had backup plans. And so my mom was the one that needed just a little bit more convincing, because she doesn't have a college degree, but she's very successful because she's a voiceover actress, and she's very successful with that. But growing up, she would always tell me that you need a college degree. Yeah. And so, but again, just because they could see that I was passionate about it, and I wasn't just gonna just dropping out of college just cause. That's why they were very supportive. So that's kind of how I got started. And so I moved out of the house full time in May of 2017 to DC, the DC area. Started my internship, and after my first day at Independent Journal Review, which was a social media based news organization, after my first day at my internship, I was offered a full time job by my boss.
What?
Because I saw the news break about Kathy Griffin. This seems like ages ago, but Kathy Griffin holding up that holding up that bloody beheaded.
Yeah, that was 10 years ago, right? I mean, it was forever ago.
Right, and so I wrote that up, and so they could tell that I had a good eye for news and content. And then in addition to that, I covered the Charlottesville riot in August of that year, and so they could tell that I was very serious about wanting full. And so after my first day, that's when they offered it, and then I've been out here ever since. And then since then, I've worked at Mediaite, which is a New York-based company, but I stayed here in the DC area. I've worked at the Washington Examiner, and now I'm here at Townhall, and I'm their senior writer.
Senior writer. See, it's unbelievable to me, and I always liken everything. I kind of think it through the lens of flying. Some people, they just don't have a feel for flying. You can't teach them how to do it. They just don't have a feel for it. Is journalism one of those things that you can do journalism classes and learn stuff, but either you have a feel for it or you don't? Like, is there any correlation to that? Because it feels like you have a feel for it, and you've been able to drive really great success without needing a degree, without needing all these classes. Am I somewhat in the ballpark of what it's like being a journalist?
Yeah. And it's because, I mean, look, so for anyone that follows me, on Twitter or my work, they know I'm very much against the media bias that our country's media ecosystem has, which is angled naturally, in my opinion, against conservatives, which is why conservative media, which I've basically almost worked in my entire career, almost. That's why conservative media exists, and that's why I have a job. It's because people are tired of the media bias, and so. But if you look at some of the educational backgrounds of like the reporters at CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times, Washington Post, they go to some pretty big Ivy League schools like Yale and Harvard, and they get these good degrees, but they are absolutely terrible journalists in terms of objectivity. Yeah, they might get scoops, and okay, that's fine, but then in terms of like what people want to see in reporters and journalists, which is be more objective than not, they often fall flat with that. And so so the reason why I say that is because you can have a fancy degree from the Columbia School or Columbia University and what have you, but because it doesn't take a whole lot to just, and this is what I like about going to protests and riots, it doesn't take a whole lot to just record and report what's happening without any commentary. Now, I do commentary sometimes with my appearances on Fox News if it's relevant, but oftentimes not. And I'm sure if you've seen this with my appearances, I really just talk about what I've seen on the ground.
And I want you to know that's the thing that I love, and I think that's a lot of what your probably new followers have loved. Mm-hmm. They tune in, they see you're in it, you're showing video that you shot, and it's not like, hey, you heard third hand. I mean, you were there, and you're sharing the facts of what you saw. It didn't feel like you had an agenda, probably because you didn't have an agenda. You were just, this is what happened. I want to report to you the news, which reporting the news, such a novel idea, not done through a preconceived lens, right?
Right, and there have been times where I went to. So the most recent example that I can point to was the big pro Second Amendment rally in Richmond in January, and before the protests took place, the media was already, the members of the mainstream media were already kind of coming up with hits and hit pieces and trying to say it was a white supremacist, white nationalist rally against gun control. And I was very familiar with the people who are organizing it, mainly the Virginia Citizens Defense League. And they're by no means white, they're by no means Nazis or anything like that. And they were trying to wish cast it as sort of a next Charlottesville where there's going to be violence and, because all these guns are around. And so I went, I was going to go there regardless to cover for Townhall, but I didn't really know what I really wanted to do because, most journalists that were going to be there on the ground were just going to ask them hey, what do you what are you here? What are you against? And, and that's fine and dandy, but you kind of want to have a different angle than it.
Yeah.
And so, I went there specifically to refute the notion that this was a white supremacist rally, and because it just simply wasn't. And so I was more biased in my live tweeting, I guess, because just because there were a bunch of minorities there, and me being of Latino heritage, I felt completely safe. That no white person came up to me to ask hey, we don't take too kindly to your kind around here, or anything. I never.
Yes,
that was
seriously.
Out of all the protests that I've covered and riots, that was the safest one I ever felt and the one I've ever been at. And so that really, and I went and after that I made my first appearance on Fox News on Tucker Carlson's show to talk about that specifically, because I was saying this was if you just watched MSNBC and CNN, this was supposed to be another Charlottesville, but that wasn't happening at all. And so it very much, but outside of that, I do like to just report what I see, because I know that's what people want at the end of the day, in terms of because like I said, if it's relevant for commentary, sure, and that's usually after the fact, because I'm very opinionated on my Twitter account. But you know, right then and there in the moment, my job is just to report what I see, and unfortunately, you know, and it's not even just for like on the scene coverage, but unfortunately, you know, a lot of news organizations feel the need to continually editorialize and spin and just interject things when that's not needed. I'm not saying I'm against op-eds. I'm not saying against commentary and punditry, but it's just used more often than it should be, in my opinion.
Well, you know, you're out there finding news, reporting on what's happening. You know, Trump has said that the fake news is the enemy of the people. Now, obviously, and everyone has just forgotten the fake part and just, you know, made it out to be that he's against the news and the free press, which I don't believe is true at all. But, you know, what do you think culturally is happening with news and the people's trust in what's being reported versus the future of kind of where we're going? Like, where do you see the profession of journalism and news reporting going from where we are right now?
Oh man. I mean, so I will say when Trump first came out again, using the phrase "enemy of the people," you know, in regards to fake news, which I mean, so when he first said that, I was kind of thinking like, I think that's a little too much. I think I get where he's coming from, but I think there's a better way to phrase that.
I think Trump has a master's degree in figuring out the worst way to phrase things that are pretty good ideas in general sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes.
Right. And so but since then, we've seen a few news cycles that really where the media hasn't done themselves any favors. And the most obvious and glaring example, what happened in 2018 with the Covington Catholic kids, where there's videos that didn't show the whole story were posted on social media. And obviously right away, you know, people made their preconceived notions, and you know, Nick Sandmann was the next, you know, grand wizard of the KKK. Essentially, that's how they portrayed him as. And so, but then thankfully, because it was only because there was a live stream that lasted for like 4 hours. That's why it took a while for people to like really look through it all and digest. It was shown that wasn't the case at all, where he wasn't trying to intimidate this Native American man, who, by the way, committed stolen valor, which me being a Marine and him being a Marine too, because he was a Marine, but he exaggerated his service, which makes me more upset than people who didn't serve and try to claim service. So since then, and there's been many news cycles since Trump first said that, where now I've come to that, really, enemy of the people is a very, very apt description, which that shouldn't be, but it is, and it only is because the media ecosystem is very, very terrible. I mean, I'll be the first to, I'll gladly admit that. And just to provide another quick example of that, was when I was in Minneapolis at the height of the riots, that Ali Velshi on MSNBC, I saw him on the ground, but obviously I wasn't watching what he was saying because I was busy trying to dodge rubber bullets and projectiles and tear gas. But it was until later I found out that he said that the protest, you know, as a building is burning behind him, he said that the protest was not generally unruly. And it was just like, are you serious? Like they abandoned the police precinct. There's buildings on fire all over the place. I mean, like, how can you say that with a straight face? That's fake news. And you're trying to push a narrative because it's not people in MAGA hats running around burning a liberal city. It was rioters, you know, it was rioters in a heavily democratic city. So, and that was just one example from that again, just continues that the only reason why the fake news and enemy of the people nicknames stick and have any weight to them is because there's truth to it. And it's unfortunate. It shouldn't be that way. And that's why the media needs to do a much better job. But until it until they do better, Trump's going to keep hammering on it, and it's going to keep resonating with people because there's truth to it.
You said something before that I really want to dig into for a quick minute. You're out there with the riots, with the protests, dodging rubber bullets, the dodging tear gas. You're not saying that as like a vague, kind of, trying to embellish. That's literally you're literally in the mix. So you're not coming in for a couple minutes and then hopping in your SUV and driving off. You are in the mix. So describe to us, are you concerned that you're going to get recognized? Someone's going to see, hey, that's the guy who's on Fox News. Let's get him. What's going through your mind as you're preparing to be in the mix of what could turn to be a dangerous thing for you?
Well, I haven't been too concerned about that, just because my work hasn't received national attention up until recently. So, I mentioned about dodging rubber bullets, which did happen, but unfortunately, I got hit by one in my chest on the second day I was there by I believe it was a Minnesota state trooper that hit me. But so since like I said, my work has been recognized nationally with all the Fox News appearances and increase in my follower count. That has been kind of a concern, especially because in June, there was a protest that happened outside Lafayette Park in Washington, D.C., and I got video of these two women screaming at cops. I mean, they're just screaming almost incoherently at these cops. Yeah. I posted it, and again, I didn't add any comments. It literally was just, two women are screaming at cops outside the White House, and that was it. That video went viral. It got 2 million views altogether. The next day, I went back out because there was more protests happening, and then I got recognized. And those two women and their friends were back out there, and they recognized me. Now, so I had to leave the area just because they were just screaming. They were telling me I was putting her life in danger by deleting by having the video, because one of them didn't have her mask on. Oh, and so her full face could be seen. And I said, well, that's not really my fault if you have your mask off, and because you're at a public protest, you're out in the street screaming at a cop. Like that's not my problem. And I can tell you, your life is not in danger. I can assure you, just because no one knows who you are. Yeah. And so, but I cracked a joke, just because I was being smart with them, and they were, oh, you made a joke, and I secretly recorded that whole interaction, and then of course I posted that to Twitter as well. Of course. And so I do take steps to ensure my safety, but I mean, it's just part of the job, and this shows how these are not necessarily all peaceful protesters. And I'll be the first to report if there's a peaceful protest happening. I mean, I have no problem with that, because again, that's just simply what's happening. But when it becomes violent, right, that's when they have an issue with the press. And it's not just me. And in fact, I actually just wrote a story about Black Lives Matter protesters in Seattle harassing the local news crew, right? I mean, and it's not even like a Fox News local affiliate, it's CBS and a radio station. But it doesn't matter to them, because they don't want their criminal acts recorded, because they don't want to face the consequences of that. And so that's why they don't like press. They say they don't like press because, oh, they put our lives in danger, because people, and I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It might happen, but the real reason why they don't like the media is because they don't like the media reporting the criminal acts that they're doing out in the open. I mean, it's not like we're going into their houses and they're fighting cops. They're causing property damage. They're harassing people who aren't part of the protest, just out in the street and out in the open. And yeah, guess what? We're going to record that, because that's a newsworthy thing that's going to happen. Just as much as it's newsworthy if there is police brutality, because like I said, I've been on the receiving end of that. We'll report on that too, just because if you're a good reporter, you will just report what's happening, and that's what I always strive to do.
What's on your reporter journalist bucket list as you look at the next couple years? Do you want to keep being in the mix of things that are happening? Do you want to be the White House person in the press room? Do you want to have your own show? Do you want to start your own website and your own news deal? What's some of the things on your bucket list?
No, I very much love Townhall. they're townhall.com. They've been really great to me, and they definitely facilitate. They try to facilitate every request that I put in. Obviously, sometimes they can't say yes. They can't say yes to everything, unfortunately. But they very much. So I see myself working at Townhall for quite some time. In terms of I don't think I'd want my own show, just because, again, I very much love going out in the field, going out and reporting what's happening, and I'm not adverse to working in the office or obviously working from home. But my strength and what I enjoy, I mean, this is hard work. It's hard work because just to go back to Minneapolis, I only had about 3 hours of sleep the night before I landed in Minneapolis, and that's just because I was so anxious. I was a little excited just because this was something that because Minneapolis was just burning I was just watching a bunch of live streams, and things were up in flames, and looting was going on, and so I was like, oh shoot, like this is really serious. And so I had about 3 hours of sleep. By the time I landed, I got into the area of the 3rd precinct and like ground zero of all that around noon, and I stayed out till like 1. And so and I was, walking, and there was some running, and there was there was no food really around, because there's no place to go out to eat. So I was like surviving off of like the looted power bars and Cliff bars that they were giving away.
Oh man.
And that was the thing too. I mean, that was literally the collapse of society for those few days, because it was just lawlessness. So. And I was by myself, right? Townhall doesn't have a budget big enough for security, and so I'm just out there just shooting from the hip, proverbially, on all that. And so I was very, but at the end of the day, I very much enjoy that, which is I guess the Marine, like, hardcore craziness part of me that my mom does not appreciate sometimes, because she does, as any good mom would. She doesn't like when I want to go to these dangerous cities and situations, but she understands, and she knows why so it's weird. I like being in those kinds of situations, even though, yes, like it could, like I got seriously hurt with that rubber bullet. And so I want to continue doing stuff like that.
Man, you are a true journalist. I love your stuff, that you have a following that's growing because of it. Keep doing what you're doing, because people are interested, people are reading, they are listening. And this is the season where we need journalists like you telling everyone else like what's happening. And thank you. Thanks for taking time to be on the podcast. I know you're really busy. I appreciate it. And just keep it up, man.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me.